morning and welcome to Rising. We've got a terrific show for you today. And Niall Stanage is back in the hot seat. Although I guess you were yesterday as well.
I was, although I was thrown because Amber Duke was here on a Wednesday. Almost an unprecedented situation.
You were thrown. I was thrown.
Yeah.
My schedule just so happened to be that I didn't have to film anything for any news organization yesterday, which almost never happens, and so I didn't even know how to dress myself for the morning when I didn't have to wear a suit. It's like I don't own any normal pants anymore. I don't own jeans that are in the style of the young people now, so I can't even bother.
No young people's jeans for you. So were you just idling for the rest of the day then?
I had to go into my other place of employment for some meetings, but
Excellent.
I'm like, nobody wants to hear me talk on television today. What is this?
Shocking. Well, we're glad you're back, and we have plenty to talk about.
Yes, we do.
So, coming up on Rising, President Trump is reportedly considering a new refugee plan that would prioritise English speakers and those whom he says would more easily assimilate. Some on the left, however, are sounding the alarm.
And of course, Elon Musk is outraged over the fact that two of the teenagers who allegedly assaulted one of his Doge employees are avoiding prison time.
And some comments that President Trump made during a ceremony to award the late Charlie Kirk with the Medal of Freedom. Those comments are raising some eyebrows. But first, in the normal fashion, Robby, let's start us off with what is on your radar.
Well, we're going to start out with some agreement today, I think, Niall. No one is happy about the Pentagon's new press policy. Earlier this week, media outlets spanning the political spectrum almost universally declined to sign on to a memorandum issued by Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth. It would require defense reporters to promise that they will not seek to obtain unauthorized information. Quote, information must be approved for public release by an appropriate authorizing official before it's released, even if it is unclassified, the memorandum states. Now, Hegseth is, of course, within his rights to forbid his own employees from leaking stories to journalists to the extent that's possible, and federal officials who do leak classified documents can be prosecuted under existing law, although it's often, frankly, in the public's interest for them to do so anyway. But if anything is to be done, government policy should place constraints on government employees, not on journalists or the public. Now, obviously, reporters are going to try to induce Pentagon officials to provide information, even if it's not approved for public release by Hegseth's personal PR department. Now, this is so obvious it's effectively nonpartisan, which is why conservative news outlets from Fox News, Newsmax, Daily Caller, Real Clear Politics, The Washington Examiner all joined liberal and mainstream organizations in rejecting this arrangement. In fact, the only outlet that has agreed to the Pentagon's terms is One America News Network, which is effectively tied to the administration. Kari Lake, overseer of the government-funded broadcaster Voice of America, announced earlier this year that the platform would use content from OANN. As an aside, this is a very good argument against government-funded media, be it right-leaning or left-leaning. Now, the major broadcast channels issued a joint statement reading in part, "The policy is without precedent and threatens core journalistic protections. We will continue to cover the U.S. military as each of our organizations has done for many decades, upholding the principles of a free and independent press." Now, in response, the department is attempting to split hairs. Quote, "The policy does not agree for them to ask for them to agree, just to acknowledge that they understand what our policy is," said Sean Parnell, a spokesperson for the Pentagon Department. This has caused reporters to have a full-blown meltdown, crying victim online. "We stand by our policy because it's what's best for our troops and the national security of this country," end quote. Whether it's agreeing to the policy or acknowledging the policy, look, this comes to the same thing. The Pentagon doesn't want reporters asking questions and obtaining answers without Hegseth's approval. That's self-evidently absurd and is not in the interests of liberals or conservatives, or more importantly, the American public. Now, why liberals should reject such a policy is fairly obvious. Trump-critical journalists should feel free to hold the administration to account. But even MAGA-friendly reporters, and this is important, even they don't want to feel deterred from doing their jobs. For instance, imagine if, for instance, a conservative outlet obtained a tip that some defense sub-department, maybe a subcontractor, was still using DEI in hiring, or had issued a policy directive that is contrary to America First, or had simply misappropriated taxpayer funds. It happens. This last example is hardly theoretical. The Pentagon has failed 7 audits in a row. Now, it might be embarrassing for Hegseth or whoever is in charge of the department that this had happened under their watch, and they might wish to suppress a news report on it, even from conservatives. The incentive would be to decline to authorize the release of information about the situation or to release it in a way that is flattering to the administration's perspective. But conservative news organizations shouldn't play by those rules. They would be doing their readers, viewers, and subscribers a disservice if they did. Here was Ron Paul, who's no fan of mainstream media, nevertheless explaining the other day why this new policy of limiting journalist access is just very, very bad for freedom.
We don't think this is a very good idea to curtailing the ability to find information and sign up if you even want to get on a list where you might get a little bit of information. I think it's a very dangerous move that's going on right now.
Now, to the Trump administration's credit, they have made space for new media, for podcasters, social media influencers, and so on in the press pool. President Trump and his comms team understand that more and more Americans are getting news and information from a more diverse array of content providers who make use of all the new platforms available to them: YouTube, X, Spotify, Instagram, Substack, Rumble, and so on. People who make content for those platforms should have a seat at the table. Out with the old and in with the new. I'm fine with that. But as we transition to new media and discard what wasn't working about old media, we don't want to create a new media environment that fails to do solid reporting or hold the government accountable at all. Just because Hegseth is well liked by MAGA doesn't mean he should be immune from scrutiny. Conservatives need to make sure the administration is fulfilling its priorities. We don't want them getting too comfortable. If reporters can't ask questions, then we, the public, can't get answers.
I think I would fully endorse that, Robby. I don't really see anything there that I disagree with. And I think the point that you rightly highlight is the idea that this new Pentagon policy is really calling for people to simply parrot the official line. It's really calling for stenography rather than journalism. Right. That's what press offices and comms people exist for, is to put forward their preferred version of events. But that's not journalism. And to your point about the audits, the Pentagon is, as we know, this vastly funded operation, taxpayer money going in there by the billion, and of course it is in the public interest to find out what is going on there. And just a couple of other quick points. I do think it is to the credit of conservative-leaning organisations that they have, with the exception of OAN, declined to sign this. I think that's good that they're standing up for those journalistic principles. And I also think that some of the arguments made in defence of the policy, that it's about security and whatnot, are just founded on erroneous impressions, like the idea that reporters were wandering around sort of looking into the closets at the Pentagon.
As arguments about, from a security standpoint, often are the most dubious.
Yeah, absolutely. So none of those arguments stand up, I think, and it's good that only OAN has signed up to this. I think they look, frankly, rather foolish. I don't know whether they care or not. Perhaps their priority is simply kissing up to the administration. Mm-hmm. But it's good that there has been with their exception, media solidarity in opposition to this.
Right. And I just want to, push back on the idea that to be conservative media, to be pro-MAGA, to have a perspective that is friendly to what Trump is trying to accomplish, doesn't mean to be a cheerleader.
Right.
And look, if that's the perspective you have, that's fine. I'm not going to tell you not to have that perspective. I think people who have that perspective, again, should have a seat at the table and a voice in the room. But it can't be only that. There has to be pushback, or else conservatives will be ill-served. Mm-hmm. Because, even if you love Trump and you love Hegseth and you love what they're doing, they are politicians, they're government figures. Right. We don't want them getting comfortable. We want scrutiny, because these are, even if you support everything they're doing, as you said, these are massive agencies that have huge budgets, that maybe they're doing something that Trump doesn't like, and we're going to call that out. And maybe it's embarrassing the other way. Who knows? Yep. But the reporters have to be unconstrained. Right. They can't agree, we're going to tie our hands behind our back as we try to look at what the Pentagon's doing. It makes no sense. It does not serve their own audiences, which is why they've signed on to this opposition to the statement.
Absolutely, and I agree completely. There's a difference between news that is reported with a certain perspective, but is still valid journalism, and cheerleading, which is just cheerleading of no worth.
Can't have that.
We cannot. In any event, a new report is detailing the Trump administration's vision for the US refugee program, and some are calling it racist. We'll tell you why after the break. Stay with us.
The Trump administration is reportedly considering some changes to the U.S. refugee system that critics are calling a racial overhaul.
According to a New York Times report, the changes would slash the programme to its bare bones and give preference to English speakers, white South Africans and Europeans who have been, quote, targeted for peaceful expression of views online, such as opposition to mass migration or support for populist political parties. A section that, as the Times points out, appears to be a reference to the German far-right AfD party. Vice President Vance has previously criticised Germany for trying to suppress AfD views. One AfD party leader, Bjorn Höcke, was found guilty of using a Nazi slogan, "Everything for Germany," but he denied knowing the phrase's roots. Höcke also got accused of whitewashing the Holocaust for saying at a 2017 rally that, quote, Germans were the only people in the world who planted a memorial of shame in the heart of their capital. The New York Times goes on. The proposed changes would put new emphasis on whether applicants would be able to assimilate into the United States, directing them to take classes on American history and values and respect for cultural norms. The report details that some of this plan has already been enacted. You may remember Trump on his first day in office suspended the refugee admissions program. Then, in May, the administration granted asylum to dozens of white South Africans.
In response to the new report from the Times, many on the left are calling the overhaul blatantly racist. Independent journalist Anthony Lowenstein lamented on X, quote, "The future of the United States is white, Christian, and intolerant." And law professor Timothy Caulfield, parodying the new Colossus, writing, "Give me your white, your rich, your narrow-minded, yearning to breathe rage." Now, while the left is clutching their pearls, not everybody sees this overhaul as a bad thing. Florida Voice News' Eric Dougherty writes on X, "I hope this is true. We need to take in people who will assimilate into our culture. Make it happen." And Geiger Capital account on X echoed that, writing, "I voted for this. The Trump administration is looking at overhauling the U.S. refugee system, giving preference to English speakers and those who might better assimilate, being kind but prioritizing our own people." So if I were to make an argument in favor of this, I mean, it would start
if you were, hypothetically.
it would start with the fact that, I mean, if you put it to a vote, if you ask the American people how many refugees they want, they're going to say zero. They're going to, or very little. They want much fewer levels of immigration overall in every category. They want less immigration than I do on high-skilled immigration, on low-skilled immigration, refugees from war-torn parts of the world. They want none of that. So I think the defense of this is that it's in keeping with what the American people actually want their country. Now, a policy that abjectly discriminates on the basis of race is, of course, a non-starter with me. Whether they're white, brown, yellow, red, green, black, blue should not matter from the standpoint of accepting them. That is a flawed basis. But again, the American people want refugees who are likely to adapt to our cultures and customs, and being proficient in the language or being ideologically favorable to American ideals or Western ideals is something that I'm sure would be popular. It shouldn't be racially based, because people of Pakistanis or Nigerians of any ethnic background or religious background can want to share in our prosperity and support America. So again, it has nothing to do. It should have nothing to do with race itself. But I guess I'm not sure I would say that there should be no scrutiny of what the people's views are. I mean, it would just be grossly unpopular. Would you admit that?
What would be grossly unpopular?
To bring in refugees with no consideration of if they have, chanting death to America from any religious background or any perspective. If you ask the American people how many refugees who despise the American project would you like to bring in here, they're going to say zero.
Yeah, but that's not what this is about, though. I mean, you're talking there about people literally chanting death to America. For a start, that's just not what is going on here. The refugee program, it's maybe worth emphasizing, and I know you know this, but there is some confusion in public debates. This is a different program from people who arrive at the southern border and claim asylum status. There is a refugee resettlement program in this country. And there, I'm not sure when that distinction is acknowledged, if you're right in saying that the American people writ large would want the number to be zero. The number under Biden was capped at 125,000 a year in a nation of 330 million people. I mean, it's really not that many. But the central point to me, and the reason I object to this Trump proposal so much, is the whole point here is, are people fleeing persecution, fleeing abuse in their home country, in whatever the context should be? And if they are, and if they can prove that, then that is the criteria under which they should be admitted. And if they don't reach that criteria, they can be rejected on that basis. To suggest, for example, that people in Germany who object to inward migration into Germany are being politically persecuted in the same way that someone in Sudan, amid sort of civil war, is being persecuted, seems to me ludicrous on its face. And when things are suggested that are ludicrous on their face, I think it is valid to figure out, is there some other motivation? And this, from the Times' reporting, seems plainly to prioritise either white South Africans or white Europeans over people from elsewhere in the world.
Right. So I guess I might personally just disagree with the aims of the refugee program then. I don't think we have some burden to take in people who are being just persecuted elsewhere. Now, if the U.S. is the cause of the persecution, I favor reforming policies that are contributing to the destabilization of those countries. You would agree, to take an extreme example, Al-Qaeda is persecuting ISIS somewhere. We're not going to, ISIS is the victims of Al-Qaeda's political persecution and vice versa. We're not going to bring them in. So it's not, when it has nothing to do with us. But I'm still very willing to welcome people from other countries. But to me, the basis is not so much, well, are you being politically persecuted? It's, do I want you in my country? For instance, if there's Nazis in Germany or some, far-right underground, hopefully white nationalist movement that's being persecuted, I don't really want to bring them to our country because that's incompatible with our values. But having people who are successful at business or high-skilled or wealthy, who will contribute to our prosperity and don't have extremist values, that I'm going to say yes every time to that, regardless of what your ethnic makeup is or where it is. But it's not based on your persecution. It's based on what you can contribute to my society.
Right, but that's an issue of economic migration, though. I get back to the point that in refugee resettlement, the United States accepting 125,000 people a year as other nations accept similar numbers relative to their own population is not a massive ask for the greater good of humanity. And when people are prioritising white South Africans, for example, I think that A, the evidence that those people are being persecuted is extremely scant, and B, it is intended to make what I consider a fairly noxious political point. President Trump has been blasted for comments he made at a memorial event for Charlie Kirk. We'll hear what he said after the break. Don't go anywhere. President Trump is under fire from critics over what they say is a wildly inappropriate and strange comment.
Earlier this week, Trump awarded the late Charlie Kirk with a Presidential Medal of Freedom and also gave a speech. He was discussing how far-left radicals were becoming violent, but that their ideas were ultimately failing.
And then he said this.
And they become violent. They seem to become very violent on the left. They've rammed vehicles into federal law enforcement, fired sniper rifles at ICE agents, and me, But I made a turn at a good time. I turned to the right. Charlie couldn't believe it, actually. He said, "How the hell did you make that turn?" I said, "I don't know."
Podcaster Keith Olbermann wrote on X, Donald John Trump has always been one awful, sick pseudo-human. He has somehow gotten worse. He has somehow said the worst thing anybody has said about the indefensible killing of Kirk. And the Bulwark's Tim Miller wrote, Marco Rubio might need to denaturalize the president for anti-Kirk speech.
Am I missing something? What is he's just in his Trumpian way commenting on. I mean, if he's suggesting that it was due to his awesomeness that he dodged the bullet, like a Matrix kind of whoosh. It's just, but yeah, we've all commented. I mean, I feel this. It's miraculous. Depending on what you believe, it's that it was this close to just killing him, and we see the damage bullets can do. Obviously, I don't think it was. I don't know. What am I missing?
I thought it was distasteful, honestly. I mean, it's partly because it just is Trump being Trump, but I don't think the issue is him talking about his own narrow evasion of an assassination attempt. I think it's the thing that he says about, oh, Charlie couldn't believe it, where he's talking about a person whom he knows who got shot to death, and for whom many of us have seen the graphic imagery of that happening.
Awful.
And he's implying that Trump, had kind of skills at dodging bullets that Charlie Kirk didn't have. I think that's why people kind of flinched at it.
I didn't read and Charlie didn't into it, but Charlie, I'm sure, like virtually all of us, commented on, again, the miraculous nature of him looking. Trump's talked about the graph that saved his life. He turned to look at a graphic he had put on
of immigration
on the screen, and that so then it just and from what we understand to be, with the power these guns have and the scopes they put on them, you can take it wasn't like an amazingly difficult shot or anything from that distance, which I think was the case for the distance from which Charlie Kirk was shot by someone who also had familiarity with guns. But what experts have told me is that you could have never shot a gun in your life and practice with it with that kind of weapon at that kind of distance for an afternoon, and you would be able to pull off that shot.
Okay, well,
which is terrifying.
It is terrifying, yeah.
But I guess I would get. Look, I'm not we don't defend everything Trump says, and sometimes it's kind of offensive. And I think there are things, in fact, that were said by him at the memorial service that were 10 times more offensive than this. This one, I don't know.
I just
Let
think
it slide.
Well, I think two things. I think one is the making it about himself at a Charlie Kirk memorial is one of the things that people objected to. And then I think the other reason that maybe people on the left, and I'm not a Keith Olbermann fan, but like other more reasonable people on the left.
He's not a fan of yours because you're sitting next to me.
He's probably
He does not like Rising. He does not
he
like
does,
me. He
won't be watching.
Canceled.
Oh, well, many years ago I wrote a critical piece of... Anyway, I think the more reasonable argument on the left is that people on the right have expressed offence at people who merely disagreed with Charlie Kirk. And there's the President of the United States at a memorial saying, I was great at dodging bullets. I think that's where people have the objection to.
All right. I see it as I was, in his Trumpian way, saying he was lucky, but we'll disagree on that one.
We shall be back on Rising soon. I'll be taking a deep dive into where the Democratic Party is going wrong and where changes have to be made. Stick around.
All right, Niall, what's in your notes today?
Well, we might have common agreement to a degree. Again, the Democratic Party is in the doldrums. And isn't me saying that, it was Bernie Sanders' verdict during his big CNN town hall event with AOC last night. Party loyalists will complain that Sanders himself has never formally joined the party. But that's not really the point. His prognosis is right and everyone knows it. Democratic voters are pretty unhappy with the Democratic Party. A poll in July, also from CNN, showed that 22% of Democrats, almost 1 in 4, held an unfavourable view of their own party, and an additional 11% offered a sullen no opinion to the pollsters. Those numbers, which are basically stats that measure the contours of an unhappy base, were twice as big among Democrats as the equivalent figures among Republicans. Now, anytime a critique of the Democratic Party comes from someone like Sanders or AOC, it gets cast as a matter of the left versus the centre-left. That's kind of sort of true, but it's not a matter of the bare bones of policy or doctrine. It's not really about whether a politician is officially a Democrat or an independent or a democratic socialist. It's something more fundamental. There's a groundswell of Americans, left of centre for sure, who simply don't believe the Democratic Party establishment is speaking the truth. It's not offering clarity or courage or conviction. And with the stakes as high as they are right now, that's just not acceptable. The most recent establishment Democrat to find this out the hard way was New Jersey Senator Cory Booker. Booker sat down for an interview with the I've Had It podcast, an increasingly popular show hosted by Jennifer Welch and Angie Sullivan. The pod is avowedly pro-democratic. Its Oklahoma-based hosts recoil in horror at the Trump agenda. But if Booker and his staff thought the senator was in for an easy ride, they were wrong. An exchange between Welch and Booker over Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu went viral for all the wrong reasons. Let's watch.
Do you think he's a war criminal, Benjamin Netanyahu? Do you think he's a war criminal?
Again, these are questions that a lot of people think are the important litmus tests that are loaded and hot. My urgency is to be an effective leader in bringing an end to this crisis. And I get these questions all the time that, to me, undermine my urgency.
It didn't end there.
I think the thing that Democrats get so frustrated with, where we are right now, where you see like the Zoran Mamdanis and the Graham Plattners rise up, because they can go on podcasts and you can say, do you think Benjamin Netanyahu is a war criminal? And they just say, yes. And that's the end of it. It's not all of the rhetoric answering. It's like what happens to Democratic politicians, they go through this like prism, and then we can't ever get like the answer to yes or no conversations like you do with Bernie and others. And that's the frustration for the Democratic base with leadership. Do I think Netanyahu is worse than Trump?
Yes.
That was a simple question and a very weaselly answer that pleased no one. Another establishment Democrat had the same kind of fail on a different topic. Our old friend Andrew Cuomo, the former governor who's running for New York City mayor as an independent after Zoran Mamdani beat him in the party primary. In Cuomo's case, the subject was the prosecution by Trump's Justice Department of New York Attorney General Letitia James. Here's the former governor on New York station, Pix 11.
Should the president have gone after Tish James?
Well, my point is, and I think this is nearly uniform, both sides, Democrats and Republicans, believe there's too much politics in the justice system.
Yeah, this is what your statement said yesterday, but should the president have gone after the attorney general? Was he right to do that?
Well, he would say he didn't go after her. The prosecutor will say they were just doing justice, which is what Tish James said about going after President Trump.
That answer was so halting and bloodless that Mamdani himself eagerly tweeted it out. Even California Governor Gavin Newsom got into trouble in yet another podcast recently when he gave a weirdly halting answer after the host Van Lathan asked him about the influence of AIPAC. The problem here isn't really not being left-wing enough. The problem's giving mealy-mouthed, weak responses on fundamental questions. Is Netanyahu a war criminal? The answer, in my view, is yes. The evidence is overwhelming. Is Trump targeting Tish James because he wants retribution? Again, the answer seems yes, plainly. And you've no business looking for votes from Democrats if you're not willing to say so. I'm not picking on Booker or Cuomo for their own sakes. It's because these examples showcase a timidity that has hung around the Democratic Party establishment for too long. And that timidity has curdled and become to smell worse and worse, especially with where we are right now. If you don't speak the truth with some courage, how can you connect with Americans who are struggling in their own lives, deeply worried about their country, the world, and their own place within it? Now, it isn't all bleak. There are some people willing to be different. And I'm not only talking about Sanders or AOC or Mamdani. Graham Plattner is an oyster farmer, a military veteran, and a Democrat running for the party's Senate nomination in Maine. He's capturing the imagination of a lot of voters, and it's pretty easy to see why.
And once we have fought back fascism, once we have protected our democracy, once we have protected our rights and our freedoms, It needs to be a different kind of freedom, not just a romantic freedom, not a freedom of talking about rights we must defend, but a material freedom. The freedom to have time and energy to live a life of dignity and joy. The freedom to be able to put your energy back into your neighbors and your community, not just scraping by so you can afford a roof over your head. That's not freedom. Struggling, existing, not being able to follow your dreams, that is not freedom.
See, pretty simple. If you have conviction, if you have some courage, if you can call things as they are, people understand. They understand because they can feel the truth. And they don't feel it from the Democratic Party leadership right now. And that simply has to change.
Yeah, exactly. Everything you said. I think it is about more conviction than necessarily what your beliefs even are, although what your beliefs are clearly matters. But the Cory Booker is the clearest illustration.
Right.
He said, you asking me a direct question, do I think Netanyahu is a war criminal, is getting in the way of my urgency.
Right.
It was the most cringy, kind of safe, constructed by a consultant class phrasing. And this is why podcasts and new media can be improvements on traditional media, because it's harder to get away with that.
Right.
When you're talking to someone for 2 or 3 hours in the long form, you can maybe get away. It's easier to get away with that. I'm not saying you entirely get away with it, but it's easier in a briefer cable news hit where the host wants to hit a bunch of topic and move on to the next thing.
Right.
After they realize you're not going to directly answer their question. That, okay, fine, we got to move to the next thing.
Sure.
Whereas here, they had a moment for that host to say, well, wait a minute, it's not at all what we're looking for. And again, if Cory Booker doesn't believe that, he should just say no.
Exactly.
He should say, no, he's not a war criminal. He's trying to defend his country. He's doing what he thinks is best. I don't agree with all of it, but that's absurd. It's an ally of America, and it's for the people of Israel to decide whether he's an effective leader. If that's what he thinks, he could just say that.
Exactly.
You'd respect him more for just saying that.
Yeah.
He doesn't want to say anything to offend anyone or get in anyone's trouble, and then that makes people think, oh, it's because you're bought and paid for by AIPAC or Israel, whatever it is.
Exactly.
Or you just agree with them. I mean, like John Fetterman just agrees with what they're doing and says that plainly enough, and is actually pretty popular less so among Democrats, but is making up for it with the amount of popularity he gets from Republicans. Which is a strategy.
Right.
This strategy is just a failing strategy.
Right. I mean, I think that people do admire conviction. And I think that goes across the board regardless of people's ideology. And that is the kind of thing that's so lacking in that Booker answer. I would say the Cuomo answer as well, where it's just like, let me not really say anything. Right. And in the attempt to not offend anyone, you actually don't please or inspire or excite anyone either, and that's obviously
right. What are you doing? You have to be willing to risk something,
right? Or
why are you even running? But so many of these people are not running for any reason to bring about any change or that's very background noise kind of thing. They enjoy being in power and they enjoy occupying these positions for forever. And the
in it to win it, as Hillary Clinton used to say, right? Which is like the purpose is to win the office.
Had plenty of these people as well, but they're being substantially replaced by enthusiastic, people who really feel serious conviction about how great President Trump is and how great his agenda is and manifest it at all times. And maybe when the camera's not rolling, they go, okay, I can let my hair down for a minute. But there's something genuine about it. You can't fake this to some degree. I talk to these people like, man, they are true believers.
Yeah, I mean, I think authenticity, not to be too cliched about it, but authenticity is important in politics or in anything, in life. Really.
Yeah. Next up, 2 teens were charged in the assault of a former Doge staffer, Edward Korestein, also known as Big Balls. Can I say that on this morning's show? Well, I just did. The assailants will not receive jail time. We'll be discussing that up next.
New updates in the story of former Doge staffer Edward Korestein, who was assaulted in August.
Korestein was reportedly jumped by up to 10 juveniles in Washington, D.C. Now, 2 of those teenagers charged in the assault are avoiding jail time. A report from D.C.'s CBS affiliate says the 2 individuals are a 15-year-old boy and a 15-year-old girl. Now, the report said on Tuesday the 15-year-old boy was sentenced to 12 months probation and the girl pleaded guilty to simple assault and will serve 9 months probation.
The 19-year-old Corey was a key member of Elon Musk's Doge initiative to shrink the government. Authorities say the group of teenagers attempted to carjack him and his girlfriend. Corey says the ensuing assault left him with a broken nose and a concussion. After the announcement of the teenagers avoiding jail time, he responded on X, writing, "To this day, they've only caught 2 out of the 10. 8 of them remain on the street. That night could have gone far differently. Think of your daughters and mothers. The same group attacked people before and after us, breaking ribs and stomping heads. This senseless crime must be stopped." Just a week after the assault, President Trump announced he was sending in National Guard troops, purportedly to deter crime in the nation's capital. Tuesday's verdict was handed down by DC Associate Judge Kendra Briggs. When asked about the verdict, President Trump had this response.
Jeanine Pirro is doing a fantastic job, and she is beside herself because you have these radical left judges that they beat the hell out of this guy. And there was many people against this one guy who was really trying to protect his girlfriend. He didn't want his hooded over the door but they really beat him up badly. That just happened, right? Wow, that's terrible.
Elon Musk also responded to the news, writing on X, "This was a racist verdict by a racist judge. The simple test to apply is if the races had been reversed, the white kids would be in prison, equal justice for all." Should note that the identity of the teens is being concealed since they are juveniles. It's standard practice not to report names if they are underage. So it's not been officially confirmed what race they are. In my personal capacity, I know very well what race they are, but the race of them doesn't matter to me, and I actually don't agree with Elon that they would necessarily be
either. No.
Yeah, or if you're going to say, you got to make some, well, give me the circumstance then in the same venue where it went the other way and they got more.
That's just Elon shooting his mouth off as usual, saying the most inflammatory possible thing.
Now, I think, set that aside, I think it is fine to disagree with this necessarily. So to me, the bigger thing is, why were the 8 other people not apprehended or any charges brought against them? If these people usually how it works is you get a lesser sentence when you inform on. Clearly they should know the individuals, the other people still at large. I absolutely get why Trump and other people, sound outraged about this. I looked at it a little bit more closely. They're going to have to wear ankle monitors. They're going to be effectively under house arrest. They cannot set foot in the District of Columbia. So it's a little bit more than just like it's a slap on the wrist.
Yeah.
Even a probation charge can impact you. The charges were simple assault, and the maximum sentence you can get for simple assault, according to the law in D.C., is, I think, 120 days in prison. You can certainly argue that would have been justified in this case. 120 days in prison versus however many months of house arrest and ankle monitor, and you're restricted in other ways. Certainly prison is worse because prison is pretty bad. Nobody wants to go to prison for any length of time, but that's what they were charged with. I gather it's a first offense for them, which makes it a little bit different. I'm not a bleeding heart liberal. I used to be. I'm not anymore about crime in our cities, so I'm certainly open to the idea that the charges should have been more serious, but my point is they're 15, and according to the law, it's not like they can go away to prison for 5 or 10 years. It's not possible under the sentencing statute. It's the most you could get will be 3 months in prison.
Right.
Maybe that's what was appropriate, but it's not. That's the difference I'm saying between what they got and what the maximum they could have got under the law isn't quite as stark in this case as is sometimes the case with these judges who are giving very, in my view, lenient sentences.
Right. And the people who are arguing that the sentence should have been much more severe are just jumping past the fact that these people are juveniles. And it is expressly written that the purpose of the juvenile justice system places a far greater primacy on rehabilitating people or getting them off a trajectory of criminal behavior and has less of a punitive motivation than the adult justice system. Having read up about this in terms of sentencing that is typically applied to juveniles convicted of simple assault, I'm not at all persuaded that this is out of the normal bounds. Yes, the maximum sentence would have been slightly greater, but, I mean, first offence, maximum sentences often aren't applied. The other thing, which none of us know really, is among the 8 people who apparently got away with it, so to speak, do we know who inflicted the most damage? You know, do we know that these 2 people who are sentenced were the, you know, ringleaders, not the ringleaders?
I think we don't know that because it's not a case that just these 2 were charged. It's the case that, well, I mean, just these 2 were charged because the identities of the other people are not known. It's not as if the police sat down and said, which of these 10 figures do we think is most responsible, or there's enough evidence to charge them. Those are the ones we're charging. It's these are the 2 whose identities are known to us. Which, again, frankly, does not suggest to me that a lot of terrific police work is being done because they were in a group of, you have 2 of the people who were in a group. So you should be able to deduce who the other people were or induce them to cooperate, in which then I would support the lower, you know, this is how it works. We've all watched police procedurals. You report on, and then if you're not going to do that, then you get the book thrown at you.
Yeah, I mean,
maybe it's different for juveniles, and they're 15. It's not like, you know, when in the 16 to 18 range, there's some discretion that sentencing departments have, because in some states you can be sentenced as an adult at 16, but there's no municipality where under 16 you can be sentenced as an adult.
Right, and I just feel that a lot of people on the right or the MAGA side of things are actually advocating for unfairly punitive sentences, or sentences, as you say, that simply aren't available to in relation to a 15-year-old, as part of trying to propel this other narrative about crime. I mean, Trump was talking again at an event yesterday about Washington, D.C., and to my mind, he just spins a complete fantasy about how people were terrified to come out of their, you know, front doors, and now everyone's dining out. In fact, you know, reservations at DC restaurants dipped soon after he did the National Guard thing, because people, naturally enough, didn't like wandering around in the presence of troops.
I don't know, Niall. I'm very libertarian, but I've certainly gotten used to it. I have to be perfectly honest. I feel somewhat safer in my neighborhood with the troops everywhere. I do. I absolutely do.
I feel much less safe. I went to get a slice of pizza the other night, and there were like 4 troops in the pizzeria, and I was like, oh, I hate that. Why am I having my pizza under the eye of soldiers?
Does that really, it bothers you?
It does bother me, yeah. It does bother me.
I always thought it would bother me, but I don't know.
A divide, Robby. A divide in these matters.
Next up, conservatives are praising actress Keira Knightley over her response to a question about JK Rowling. We'll be right back after this. The famous actress, the very lovely Keira Knightley, is going viral for her response to a question about JK Rowling and the backlash surrounding her stance on transgender rights.
Knightley was doing an interview with Decider to discuss her recent film, The Woman in Cabin 10, and how she will be voicing Professor Umbridge, I hope I've got that right, in the new I do, okay, good, in the new Harry Potter audiobook series. Then the interviewer asked her this.
I saw you're voicing Professor Umbridge in the new Harry Potter audiobooks. I was wondering, are you aware that some fans are calling for a boycott, given JK Rowling's ongoing campaign against trans people?
I was not aware of that, no. I'm very sorry. You know, I think we're all living in a period of time right now where we're all going to have to figure out how to live together, aren't we? And we've all got very different opinions. So I hope that we can all find respect.
Many conservatives celebrated her response, and I see why. Breitbart reporter John Carney wrote on X, "This is amazing. The times they are a-changin'," and the Federalist John Daniel Davidson wrote, "The trans contagion is burning out, it seems." That's good, but let's remember how much damage it was allowed to do by people who were too afraid to speak out against it. Always seeing the negative.
Meanwhile, others on the left aren't too thrilled. Writer and video essayist Lady Emily wrote on Blue Sky, "The thing that gets me about actors responding like this whenever they're asked about JKR is that they always say we need to learn to agree to disagree, as if trans people are the ones leading the campaign when we're just trying to live our lives while JK Rowling posts about trans hate 24/7.
Well, I am certainly one to applaud an actor or an actress just giving a no comment. This is kind of like the inverse of your radar, where like politicians should have more conviction. Actors and actresses, I'm perfectly
less
fine
conviction,
have less political conviction. Just be like, I didn't know about that. I don't know anything about it. I hope we can all get along. Please consume my art. That's perfectly fine for me.
Well, you know, I thought that her Knightley's response was fine. I don't know if I'm, you know, sitting in this seat supposed to like be in high dudgeon about it. I always have a hesitancy about the JK Rowling thing, not out of any lack of conviction, but because people are so, I would say, fixated or so impassioned about, you know, well, in 2023, in a tweet thread, she said, to my mind, she has pretty strong criticisms of the most militant trans activists, which she puts forth emphatically. I haven't personally seen anything from her that I would consider, what should we say, bigoted or hateful. I mean, I think she's, as I say, forceful about it, but I was never quite sure why there was a push to cancel her rather than to disagree with her if you disagree with her.
And her views, and she always explains that her views are not that trans people don't exist or shouldn't exist, or that trans women are not a valid category, just that they're a category that in some cases should be of course, non-discriminated against, but should have some different accommodations, which is not a radical proposition. It's one most people agree with. Keira Knightley as Dolores Umbridge, that would be an interesting performance. Dolores Umbridge is the great villain of Harry Potter, other than Voldemort, and is just this nasty, awful woman. So to have someone as cheery and beautiful and wonderful as Keira Knightley, I adore Keira Knightley.
I can see.
Fully confess.
Pretty excited.
What an exciting and challenging role for such a lovely girl.
Well, I mean, because her whole persona is kind of the sort of English Rose type thing, right? That's basically it. So her being cast as a villain is a bit of a curious one.
Yes, well,
we shall see.
And I guess there's a new. I just listened to them all, but it's one guy who does all the voices for all the characters, and I really like that. I think I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I think I prefer them when it's just one person doing all the voices, doing like kind of rough approximations.
Rather than a whole cast of thousands.
I was entertaining you with my impression of Hertz of Flakia.
It's very good. I enjoyed it.
Fictional country in the Agatha Christie book I'm reading right now. That does it for us on Rising Live today. Look out for more YouTube exclusive content coming your way much later. And be sure to like, share, and subscribe.
You should have kept the accent going.
I can only do it a little bit. Bye-bye.